Roberto Bolaño, The Savage Detectives. Look at that beautiful cover. I had no idea who Roberto Bolaño was, nor anything about his writing or anything at all. It was a novel on the list with a cool name. And I thought, well, yes, The Savage Detectives, I want to read that. The novel begins as the diary of a 17-year-old young man who is at university. And it begins, November the 2nd. I have been cordially invited to join the visceral realists. I accepted, of course. There was no initiation ceremony. It was better that way. November the 3rd. I'm not really sure what visceral realism is. I'm 17 years old. My name is Juan Garcia Madero. I'm in my first semester of law school. I wanted to study literature, not law, but my uncle insisted. And in the end, I gave in. I'm an orphan, and someday I'll be a lawyer. So begins the diary of this young man who abandons his university studies to become a Mexican poet of the group known as the Visceral Realists. That is the novel, right up to here, to page 125. There is a lot of very graphic descriptions of sex, which I don't think I'm a prude or conservative. I just feel that graphic sexual descriptions is not very literary. It's gratuitous. But if you are writing the diary of a 17-year-old boy, what is more realistic than that? Right? If you're going for authenticity. The first section of the novel comes to quite a exciting cliffhanger on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1975, where the final scene is the two leaders of the Visceral Realists, that is Ulysses Lime and Arturo Bolaño, which is not very dissimilar to Bolaño, for good reason. They are in a car with the diary keeper, Juan Garcia Madero, and one other. There is a girl named Lupe, and they are getting the hell out of Mexico City as fast as they can because they are trying to escape from Lupe's pimp. They know that he's coming after them with a fierce vengeance. That's the end of part one. The next part of the book, we have these interviews and these reports with people who know of Ulysses Lime and Arturo Bolaño. And this section of the book, altogether and completely different from the first section, is by far the majority of the novel. And that third bit, that picks up right at the end of this part. So here they're escaping Mexico City with a dangerous pimp chasing after them. And here that story continues. And all this in the middle is the lives of these two visceral realist poets, 1976 to 1996. 20 years of the reports of the exploits and escapades of these two poets who they leave Mexico, they go to Europe. One of them goes to Africa, another one goes to Israel. They go back to Mexico. The movement known as visceral realism is pronounced dead. It is a chronicle of the lives of the people who knew them and who met them. This book is unquestionably a genius work of art. I don't think anyone can deny the massive intellectual achievement that this novel is. And I had no preconceptions about what this novel was going to be. The Savage Detectives, sounds good. So I had no idea what was in store for me. And suddenly, when I got to the second section of the novel, it was like I was playing chess, everything's going very well, and then my opponent makes a move is just miles above me. And I can either resign right now, or I can play the game out and try to learn something. That was what it was like when I hit the second section of the novel, that it was just, now we are really in the territory of great literature. However, I don't know very much about poetry. I know a little bit. And about Mexican poetry, I know nothing. In this book, there are hundreds of name references to people, which very quickly became too much for me. Let me give you an example. Can you see that? One whole page of names. And over here, one whole page of names. All of those references to artists and poets, it was a bit way too much. Now those two pages are a very extreme example of that, but frequently, often, there's a lot of reference to poetry and specifically South American, Latin American poetry. So it is a very long novel, nearly 600 pages. And the afterword in this edition is extremely good because it talks about Roberto Bolaño's life, which does not seem to be an easy one. He was a poet and he was a drug addict, and he believed in living that poet's life, that you must commit yourself working odd, menial jobs to make money to survive, only for the purpose of writing poetry and reading as much as you can. You have to be fanatical to be a poet. It's a very beautiful idea, but the reality is generally awful. But thank God for those people who are willing to go that far, to take the idea of writing something to that extreme degree, because then somehow through their suffering and their chaotic life, they can produce something as genius as this novel. It's challenging. This is not an easy book to read. If you are well versed in Mexican, South American authors and poets and poetry, by all means, you'll have a wonderful time. However, for the person who is completely unacquainted, I didn't struggle with them. It was just that there were so many references to other writers that all of them went right over my head. See, I just finished reading this novel yesterday morning, and I really do think this is one of the great novels of the 20th century. Big, but I look forward to reading it again. It may take me 5 or 10 years to get back around to it, but I will, because I think this novel deserves second reading, absolutely. Now that I have a concept of the story, the second reading will be much more enjoyable. And who knows, maybe the next time I read it, I'll be more familiar with some of those names that he refers to so often. It's been a lot of big novels for me recently. There was Of Human Bondage. I think that's over 700 pages. There was The Unconsoled. That was a video last week. That's 500 and a half. There's The Savage Detectives, which is very close to 600. And with that, I have decided that it's only going to be short novels. 8 short novels. Not one of them is over 300 pages. I have 1 more month of my first semester at university. This time, next month, the end of April, I will be finished. I will have written all of my exams, and currently I've got many essays to write. I've got 3 essays for 3 different English classes, and the Japanese class, as usual, we have quite a lot of homework. I do enjoy the Japanese class, I think, the most because it's the most clear to me if I have learned something. Like if I remember the words, if I can formulate the sentences, then I have learned. It is clear. Next semester, I'm going to be doing like 3 semesters a year. I'm going to be doing, spring, summer, and autumn. And in the summer section, I'm going to be really quite busy, but 2 of the classes are going to be creative writing classes, and I desperately hope those are going to be good classes, because my real love and my real ambition is to be a writer. In 2021, I wrote a novel, and it was the 4th novel that I have written. But the novel I wrote last year, I wrote it. It took me a couple of months. I printed it off. I did a superficial edit, and then I put it on the shelf, and it is still sitting, waiting for more work. And then I lost interest, and I decided to start a YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel really does take up quite a lot of time. Having to read a novel a week to keep up with my own YouTube schedule, that is, I'm discovering how much work that really is. I used to look down my nose at the YouTubers who reviewed short novels. There he goes again, another short novel this week. Don't have the cojones for a long novel, do you? If I'm ever a YouTuber, I'm gonna review the big, thick, fat novels. The next 8 novels are all gonna be short ones. The Savage Detectives, Roberto Bolaño. Give it a try. Go out and pick it up. Have it on your shelf. The Diary of the Teenage Boy, very good. And then the second section, it's just, all of a sudden you realize, okay, now we are in the deep water. If you want to buy the book, there is a link to buy it on Amazon. And if you click on my link and you buy something, anything, not just the book, but any purchases you make, I will get a tiny little sliver of whatever money you spend. And I would love it if you would do that. I have a Patreon page where you can help support me And this YouTube channel called Grant Loves Books, for $3 a month Canadian, I think maybe $2 American a month, you could support the channel. And for $2 a month, I write a weekly update letter. What do you expect? $2 a month, man. The minimum wage in British Columbia is $15 an hour. Don't expect too much for $2 a month, you cheap skinflint. You know, help me pay for the internet, which is terribly expensive, and just keep the channel going. I've done 7 months now, 7 months on my YouTube channel. It's growing slowly, and that's nice, but it would be wonderful if I could get a bit of financial assistance from you kind, generous people out there. Break out the credit cards. I really need the help. If you could see the minuteness of this apartment that I live in, you would start a charity foundation for me. Okay, take care.